In Scream 7, the story opens by reintroducing us to Sidney Prescott, the original survivor whose life has long been defined by trauma and resilience. Years after the events of Scream 6, Sidney has stepped away from chaos and built a quiet, grounded life in Pine Grove, Indiana. She runs a small coffee house, is married to police officer Mark Evans, and is raising her teenage daughter Tatum. For the first time in decades, Sidney seems to have found stability. However, the film quickly makes it clear that the Ghostface legacy is not finished with her. The opening sequence delivers a classic Scream-style shock. At the infamous former home of Stu Macher, now turned into a morbid tourist attraction, a couple explores the site, fascinated by its dark history. What begins as curiosity quickly turns into horror when they are attacked by a mysterious force. The encounter ends in brutal violence and the destruction of the house by fire. This prologue sets the tone for the film. The past is not only resurfacing, but being weaponized in new and terrifying ways. Following this, the narrative shifts back to Sidney's present life, where tension slowly begins to creep in. Tatum, Sidney's daughter, is rehearsing for a theater production at her school, representing a sense of normal teenage life. That sense of normalcy is shattered when Ghostface strikes again, this time directly targeting Tatum's environment. The attack is sudden and brutal, sending shockwaves through the community and pulling Sidney back into a nightmare she thought she had escaped. As the threat escalates, Ghostface begins employing a disturbing new tactic: psychological warfare through technology. Sidney starts receiving eerie video messages that feature deep-fake recreations of figures from her past, former killers and lost allies alike.
It's showtime, bitch.
These include Nancy Loomis, Roman Bridger, and even Dewey Riley, whose likeness is used to taunt and emotionally destabilize her. This innovation marks a shift in the killer's strategy. It is no longer just about physical violence. It's about breaking Sidney mentally by forcing her to relive her history. Meanwhile, the body count rises. Tatum's classmates, including Hannah and Aaron, fall victim to Ghostface's attacks, creating an atmosphere of paranoia and fear. Suspicion begins to spread among the group, particularly when Tatum's boyfriend Ben becomes a prime suspect. His behavior and proximity to the events make him appear guilty, further intensifying the emotional strain on Tatum. However, this suspicion ultimately proves to be misplaced, highlighting the manipulative nature of the killer's plan. As the investigation unfolds, Sidney and her allies struggle to piece together the identity of Ghostface. Mark, as a police officer, becomes deeply involved in the case, trying to balance his professional duty with protecting his family. At the same time, Sidney is forced to confront the possibility that this new threat is unlike any she has faced before. The use of advanced technology and calculated psychological tactics suggests a level of planning and intent that goes beyond the traditional Ghostface pattern. Tatum's role becomes increasingly central as the story progresses. Unlike Sidney in her youth, Tatum is not entirely prepared for the horrors unfolding around her. She's forced to navigate fear, grief, and isolation as those close to her are targeted. At one point, she finds herself alone and vulnerable when Sidney is drawn away, emphasizing the generational shift in the narrative. The film positions Tatum not just as a victim, but as a potential successor to Sidney's legacy. The mystery deepens with a major revelation. Ghostface is not a single individual, but a constructed illusion. The figure seen in attacks is part of a manipulated digital facade orchestrated by Marco, a disturbed IT specialist. Marco uses his technical expertise to create confusion, mask identities, and amplify fear through digital manipulation. This twist modernizes the Ghostface concept, transforming it into something more abstract and pervasive. Marco does not act alone. His accomplice is revealed to be Jessica Bowden, Sidney's seemingly kind and supportive neighbor. This revelation adds a personal betrayal to the story, as Jessica had gained the trust of Sidney and her family. Her motivation is both disturbing and twisted. She idolizes Sidney's survival and believes that trauma is the key to strength. In her mind, by subjecting Tatum to extreme fear and loss, she can mold her into a stronger, more resilient version of Sidney. This ideology becomes the driving force behind the killer's actions. Every attack, every manipulation is part of a calculated plan to shape Tatum's identity through suffering. Jessica sees herself not as a villain, but as a creator of resilience, which makes her all the more dangerous. Marco's technical skills and Jessica's psychological obsession form a lethal combination that drives the narrative towards its climax. The final act takes place at Sydney's home, bringing the story full circle to a place that symbolizes both safety and vulnerability. Ghostface captures Tatum and Mark, setting the stage for a high-stakes confrontation. Sydney arrives just in time, drawing on her experience and instincts to turn the situation around. In a tense and violent struggle, she manages to rescue Tatum and fatally shoot Marco, eliminating the technological mastermind behind the operation. However, the danger is not over. Jessica continues her mission, refusing to abandon her belief in Tatum's transformation. This leads to a final brutal confrontation between Jessica, Sydney, and Tatum. In a powerful moment of unity, mother and daughter fight back together. Tatum, having endured the night's horrors, steps into her own strength and actively participates in stopping the threat. Together, they shoot Jessica repeatedly, ending her plan and bringing the immediate danger to a close. The aftermath of the film focuses on recovery and reflection. The survivors, Sydney, Tatum, and Mark, are left to process what they have endured. But there is also a sense of resilience and continuity. Sydney and Tatum stand together, their bond strengthened by their shared experience. While the scars of the night remain, there is a clear indication that Tatum has inherited her mother's strength. The immediate danger subsides, the emotional consequences of the night begin to take center stage. The survivors, Sydney, Tatum, and Mark, are left to grapple not only with what they endured physically, but also with the psychological scars that linger. The destruction of their sense of safety is perhaps the most lasting impact. Pine Grove, once a symbol of Sydney's escape from her past, is now irrevocably tied to it. Sydney, in particular, faces a familiar yet evolving internal struggle. For decades, she's lived with the knowledge that her past can resurface at any time. But this time, the threat feels more invasive. The use of technology to resurrect faces and voices from her history forces her to confront the idea that the past is no longer confined to memory. It can be artificially recreated, manipulated, and weaponized. This realization adds a new layer to her trauma, as it blurs the line between what is real and what is constructed. For Tatum, the experience is transformative. At the beginning of the film, she exists somewhat in the shadow of her mother's legacy, aware of it but not fully understanding its weight. By the end, she's lived through her own version of that nightmare. The fear, loss, and responsibility she experiences push her into a new stage of maturity. Unlike Sydney, who is thrust into survival without warning, Tatum has grown up knowing the stories. Yet when faced with the reality, she must still find her own way to respond. Her participation in the final confrontation is especially significant. It marks the moment where she stops being a passive target and becomes an active force in her own survival. This shift is not portrayed as a simple empowerment, but as a complicated and painful necessity. The film suggests that strength forged through trauma comes at a cost, and Tatum's future will inevitably be shaped by what she has endured. Mark's role in the aftermath is also worth noting. As both a husband and a police officer, he represents the intersection of personal and institutional responses to violence. Throughout the film, he struggles to maintain control over a situation that repeatedly spirals beyond his reach. In the end, his survival reinforces the importance of family unity, but it also highlights the limitations of traditional authority in the face of something as unpredictable as Ghostface. The broader community of Pine Grove is left shaken. The murders, the revelations, and the sheer scale of the violence leave a lasting impact on the town. What was perceived as a quiet, safe place is now marked by tragedy. This mirrors the recurring theme within the franchise. No place is truly immune to horror, and attempts to escape it often lead to its reinvention in a new form. Another key element of the aftermath is the exposure of the killer's motives and methods. As investigators piece together Marco and Jessica's plan, the full extent of their manipulation becomes clear. The deepfake videos, the staged attacks, and the deliberate planting of suspicion were all part of a calculated narrative designed to control not just events, but perceptions. This revelation underscores one of the film's central ideas, that in a world dominated by digital media, truth itself can be distorted. Jessica's philosophy, though extreme, introduces a disturbing question that lingers beyond the film's conclusion. Can trauma truly create strength, or does it simply perpetuate cycles of violence? While the film ultimately rejects her methods, it does not entirely dismiss the complexity of the idea. Sydney's own history is proof that survival can lead to resilience, but it also comes with enduring pain. By attempting to replicate that process artificially, Jessica turns something deeply personal into something grotesque. In contrast, the bond between Sydney and Tatum offers a more hopeful perspective. Their relationship evolves over the course of the story, moving from one defined by protection to one based on mutual understanding. Sydney begins the film trying to shield Tatum from her past, but by the end, she recognizes that she can't fully separate her daughter from it. Instead, she supports Tatum in facing it, creating a sense of shared strength rather than imposed isolation. This generational dynamic is one of the film's most important contributions to the series. It shifts the focus from individual survival to collective resilience, suggesting that the burden of trauma can be lessened when it is carried together. At the same time, it raises the possibility that the legacy of Ghostface may continue through new perspectives and new experiences. The closing moments of the film reinforce this balance between resolution and continuation. While the immediate threat has been